Hey everyone, MeltingMan234 here, and welcome to another episode of Forgotten Media, where I dig up some stuff you may or may not have heard of. Now, some of you know, I am a fan of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic. I started the show when Season 1 had already finished, and just before Season 2 started. I liked it so much that I even went to some various My Little Pony themed conventions, mainly TrotCon, Winnie City, and Ponyville Ciderfest. And since I'm still in a bit of a G4 mood, I decided to cover something related to the Equestria Girls series, especially since it's now been 10 years since the release of Rainbow Rocks, a film that's rather special to me because it was the only Equestria Girls film that I got to see in theaters. Man, I definitely remember there was some drama for this series when it was first announced. Of course, this was also back in the day when we all thought Season 3 was going to be the last season of the show. The first trailer was more of, here's Twilight Sparkle and friends, but now they're humans! And people thought this was the new direction for the series and all that. I was unsure at first, but I was willing to give it a chance. Then the second trailer came out, revealing more of the plot, where now it's Twilight Sparkle travels to an alternate universe to get her crown back. And that piqued my interest. Guess I'm just a sucker for those stories involving characters traveling to alternate universes. Overall, I think Equestria Girls is fine. It was neat seeing official human designs of some of our favorite ponies, and giving us some new characters like the fan-favorite Sunset Shimmer. And despite the Equestria Girls series being canon to the main series, it didn't really overshadow Friendship is Magic, like what most people feared it would. It was kinda just doing its own thing in its own corner, while the main series continued on. Which brings us to the IDW comics. Now, when it comes to the MOP comics, they have done a lot of lengthy spin-off series, like the Micro series, the Friends Forever series, and various other titles. You'd think the same would be said for Equestria Girls, right? A nice way to expand on that alternate universe, flesh out characters like Flash Sentry, or provide new twists on established characters and all that. Well, you might be surprised to hear that they only made 3 one-shot specials, technically 4, and some spin-offs that featured the Dazzlings. So let's start things off with the first issue, which just so happens to be the first MOP annual special from IDW. This issue acts as a prequel to the first Equestria Girls film, with 2 stories. The first one, The Fall of Sunset Shimmer, gives us a story focusing on Sunset Shimmer's time in Canterlot, back when she used to be a personal student of Princess Celestia. Much like how Twilight Sparkle started off, Sunset excelled in magic, but couldn't be bothered to socialize and make friends. Celestia shows Sunset the crystal mirror to try and help reflect on herself, to which Sunset sees herself as some pony who could be great and rule over Equestria. But when she gets a glimpse of a human version of herself, she becomes obsessed in wanting to know the magic of this mirror, despite Celestia saying that she isn't ready yet. Fueled by her own selfish ambitions, Sunset takes matters into her own hooves by entering a restricted area in the Canterlot archives. After going through several books on dark magic, she finally finds a book that talks about the mirror, right when Princess Celestia discovers her in the restricted area. Sunset is more pissed off about the fact that Celestia kept this kind of information away from her, and demands Celestia to make her into an alicorn princess. But Celestia refuses. And as punishment, Sunset is removed from being Celestia's personal student, while being escorted out of the castle by the royal guards. Soon after this, Celestia would discover the guards knocked out and stating that Sunset Shimmer went through the mirror, and the story ends with Celestia telling the guards to move the mirror to the throne room to not only remind her of one of her greatest failures, but also hopes that maybe one day Sunset Shimmer will come back. So yeah, already we're off to a good start with this story. Now the movie gave us a brief description on Sunset's past, but if you wanted a little more to it, plus some visuals, then this'll cover you. Especially when you have Andy Price doing the artwork. Always nice to see his stuff. The second story, simply called Equestria Girls, focuses on Applejack, Rainbow Dash, Rarity, Pinkie Pie, and Fluttershy being interviewed on how they all first met at the freshman fair, while starting off their first day at Canterlot High. It's a neat story with the characters going through their own struggles, from Applejack trying to fit in to Pinkie Pie trying to find her purpose in life. Instead of Sunset Shimmer, the main antagonists are actually Applejack's cousins, Babseed and Sunflower Seed. Yes, there does exist an official Equestria Girls version of Babseed, though she's a lot more minor in this story, while Sunflower gets the main spotlight, being the mean girl looking down on the non-popular ones and taking advantage of Rarity's interest in fashion. But aside from that, the main characters act like how you would expect. Rainbow Dash is the boastful one who later learns to be more loyal, Fluttershy is the shy one, but thanks to Rarity, she starts to try and show kindness to others, even to those who had been mean to her. And Pinkie Pie is still Pinkie Pie. We also get some other familiar faces in this universe, like Mrs. Harshwinny. Yeah, I guess she's married in this universe or something. As well as seeing human versions of Spitfire and the Wonderbolts, and even Big Guy and Runt show up. Yeah, a couple of one-shot villains from the micro-series comics that would still make occasional cameos here and there. Oh yeah, and by the end of the story, we find out that the interviews were all done by Sunset Shimmer. Yeah, pretty much an origin story on how Sunset knew about these characters, and would later demolish their friendships until Twilight Sparkle came by and got them back together. The one glaring thing about this story is the whole freshman fair thing. Now, in the movie, they show off a photo of when they first met at the fair, and they look a lot younger than how they usually look like. But in the comics, they still maintain their standard designs throughout the whole story. It's very weird. Then again, much like the main series, the age of the Equestria Girl characters have always been a bit vague. I've mostly just theorized that they're just seniors who are at least 18 or so. I mean, that would kind of explain how in later installments, we see some of them have working jobs outside of Candlelight High, like Applejack working at a fruit smoothie shop, and Pinky working at a 50s themed cafe. The artwork is nice for the most part, does a good job in capturing the style of the Equestria Girls series. Only thing I'm not fond of are the eyes. Now, most of the time they're fine, but other times the pupils are designed so small. Now, when a character is shocked or surprised, that works, but when it's not those expressions, then it just looks really creepy. Overall, this comic is a nice way of giving some backstory to both Sunset Shimmer and the Equestria Girls versions of the main characters. Now, before we move on to the next issue, I wanted to briefly touch upon the 2014 annual special. For the most part, it mainly focuses on the fictional universe of the Power Ponies, but it does feature one story related to Equestria Girls. In said story, the maniacal maniac has escaped from her prison and decides to visit her former hideout. She discovers the crystal mirror and decides to go through it, hoping that it'll take her to a world where there are no superheroes. Instead, she winds up in a world populated by humans, along with their own version of Maniac. Both the pony and human versions fight it out for a bit, until they realize they are both the same person, just from different universes. Then they talk about how their worlds have their own superheroes that they have to deal with, and ending with the pony Maniac traveling back to her world, now filled with joy to have a brand new world that's ripe for conquering. It's a short story, but if you want to see more Maniac in action, then you'll get your fill. Funny enough, this Equestria Girls version of the character would make a few cameos and references in other media, and she even got some official merchandise. It is rather odd how Pony Maniac doesn't change her appearance when she enters this world, but then again, this is the closest you'll get to seeing G4 ponies in their pony forms interacting with humans in the Equestria Girls universe. The only other time I can think of was that one gag in the Friendship Games blooper reel. During that same year, we got the Equestria Girls Holiday Special. Now, during this time, Rainbow Rocks was already released, and it gave Sunset Shimmer quite the status change. Now, at first she was pretty bland as a villain in the first film, but luckily the second film was smart enough on handling her character progression. She wants to prove to the rest of the school that she really has become a better person, but they're not convinced that she's changed, knowing how cruel she was for so long. Fortunately, she still has Twilight and the other girls to help her out, and after helping them fight off the Dazzlings, we see that the rest of the school are now convinced that Sunset Shimmer really has changed for the better. Anyway, back to the comics. It's the holiday season at Canterlot High, and Applejack is looking forward to spending some time with her family. Sunset, on the other hand, isn't too thrilled about it. We find out that she wasn't very close to her family back in her former home, and just spends her time alone during the holidays. Feeling sorry for Sunset, AJ gathers the other girls for a private meeting to help Sunset Shimmer have the best holiday experience, by having some slumber parties. They first have one over at Pinkie Pie's place, knowing that she's the queen of party planning, and they all have a good time. Then Apple Bloom calls on the phone checking on her big sister, as well as calling her Piggly Wiggly. AJ then explains to the girls that when she was very young, she used to climb into the pig pen and play with the pigs. Thus, the nickname became an in-joke for the family. She's not really fond of having to retell that embarrassing story, but she still loves her family. The next day, the rest of the school start teasing Applejack with that Piggly Wiggly nickname. It turns out someone by the name of Anonymous made a post about it, and now everyone knows it. AJ is not pleased about this, but she still tries to make it through the day and continue on with these sleepover plans. This time, Rarity hosts one at her place. They all have a good time with karaoke, and later find a bunch of outfits that Rarity made from her closet of shame. Basically outfits she made that didn't turn out so well. Even so, the girls decide to try them on just for fun, with Sunset Shimmer taking snapshots on her phone for the memories. The next day wasn't so fun. The photos from last night were posted online making fun of the girls, and since Sunset Shimmer was the only one taking photos, they believe that she's the anonymous person. Sunset states that she wouldn't do this kind of thing anymore, but the girls aren't convinced, leaving a distraught Sunset Shimmer. Then a lot of things start happening. Sunset accuses Trixie of being the anonymous, but it turns out she had nothing to do with it. Then the rest of the schools start getting the same treatment and start blaming each other for their personal secrets getting posted online. And Sunset tries to contact Twilight Sparkle from Equestria for some help. The most she can offer is drawing parallels to the tale of the Wendigos and reminds Sunset to remember who she is and find her family. Sunset then heads off to find the main five and shows them the conversation she was having with Twilight, and reveals that she wouldn't be like her old self because these days she considers the girls to be like her family. And as for the Anonymous, well, it turns out it was actually Apple Bloom, Sweetie Belle, and Scootaloo. Yeah, they were jealous about not being invited to the sleepovers and made the account to make fun of them, though they admit they didn't plan for things to get so out of hand. And so the account is taken down, the CMC apologized to everyone they had hurt, Sweetie Belle worries that the stuff they posted is still out there, but Rarity assures her that yes, it might still be out there, but at least they did their best to take them down. And then the story ends with the characters having a holly jolly Christmas at Sweet Apple Acres. The story is alright, going for more of that dangers of posting on social media kind of story. And it's kinda odd seeing the CMC being the ones to start the conflict. Well, then again, they are kids, well, or at least freshmen, I think, in this universe. So they just didn't know any better. In some ways, this is like an alternate take on the episode Ponyville Confidentials, just taking place in a more modern setting. Artwork is done by the same artist as the previous issue, so there's not much to say there. But it does have some nice moments, like Fluttershy triggering her gamer rage mode, and apparently the social media website they use most of the time is a parody on MySpace. Yeah, is that website even still a thing nowadays? The continuity is a little more tighter here. Seems to take place after the events of Rainbow Rocks, with the whole deal of Sunset trying to contact Twilight. One weird thing about this comic is that some of Sunset Shimmer's dialogue seems to imply that she's never been to a slumber party before when she attends the one at Pinky's place. Yeah, despite the fact that she already spent a slumber party at her place during the events of Rainbow Rocks. After this story, the Equestria Girls stuff would be put on the back burner for quite some time. We might still get a reference to the events and maybe a Sunset Shimmer cameo here and there. In the meantime, we have Fiendship is Magic, a 5-issue spin-off that tries to give some of the villains like King Sombra and Queen Chrysalis some backstory. And in issue 3, we got a story dedicated to the Dazzlings, Adagio Dazzle, Aria Blaze, and Sonata Dusk. Taking place in a Greek-themed Equestria from long ago, the Dazzlings are sirens who traveled the world to put ponies under their spell with their magical singing voices and feast on their disharmony. After causing havoc in small towns, their leader, Adagio, decides that it's time for them to make it to the big leagues by taking part in a musical competition in Canterlot to feast on the disharmony from millions of ponies. But it turns out the ponies of Canterlot are harder to please, and the trio are unsuccessful. They try to figure out what they can do to make their singing powers stronger, and after Sonata talks about trying gum for the first time, Adagio is inspired to create pop music. So now the Dazzlings return to the competition to perform their pop music, and this time they're successful in putting every pony under their spell and feeding off of their disharmony. Well, except for a certain Starswirl the Bearded, who knows that the sirens are up to no good. He decides to throw his hat into the ring by taking part in the music competition, thus leading to a battle of the bands between Starswirl and the Dazzlings, and by the end, Starswirl just couldn't defeat them. So in a last-ditch effort, he pulls out the crystal mirror and banishes the sirens to another world. Despite getting rid of them, Starswirl considers the events to be one of his greatest failures, as he had failed to find some way to redeem them and help them use their magic for good. And as for the Dazzlings, they're now stuck in human forms with most of their magic being taken away. But they vow that one day they'll have enough power to return to Equestria. It's a fun story in seeing the Dazzlings' time in Equestria and how their run-in with Starswirl led to creating so many different musical genres. And it's pretty funny seeing Starswirl trying to create both rap music and rock and roll. Even so, this comic is definitely one of those examples that's led to a lot of debates on whether or not the comics are indeed canon to the main show. This particular issue came out in 2015, so this was way before the Season 7 finale establishes that whole retcon that it was actually Starswirl and the Pillars of Equestria who defeated the Sirens. But hey, at least the artwork is done by Agnes Garboska, one of my favorite artists on the MLP comics. Speaking of which, the Dazzlings would have a small but important role in the Legends of Magic comics, a series that gives some additional adventures and backstory to the Pillars of Equestria. They first encounter Stygian and try to convince him to bring them the villagers from his home, but the young scholar runs away to figure out who they are. Even so, that didn't stop the Dazzlings from attacking the village anyway, which in turn began Stygian's quest to find heroes to help save his village. So if you're looking for something a little more closer to the main canon, then Legends of Magic is for you. As mentioned before, Sunset Shimmer would make a few cameos in the comics, but there was one time that she got to have an active role in the main series during 2019. In issue 79, Apple Bloom tries to keep Mayor busy, while the rest of the town create a surprise party for her to celebrate the anniversary of Ponyville. At the end of the story, Sunset Shimmer shows up to perform a rock concert to celebrate the occasion. And apparently it's revealed that she just showed up for this day and hopes that they'll actually invite her to some other parties next time. Poor Sunset. Never gets a single invite to any parties or events from a world that she originally came from. Also, what's the deal with these other two ponies? Did she know them back in Equestria? Or did she just grab some random musicians from the Equestria Girls universe to help her out? Either way, it was a nice surprise. Makes you want to see more of Sunset Shimmer making frequent visits to her old home and stuff like that. And now we have, as of this video, the very last Equestria Girls themed comic. My Little Pony Equestria Girls Canterlot High March Radness. Yeah, that's quite a mouthful of a title. By this point, a lot of things have been established for this series. We find out that there's actually a human Twilight Sparkle, usually nicknamed Psy-Twi, who exists in the Equestria Girls universe. Magic from Pony Equestria has been leaking into this universe, all while the main cast get magical geodes that give them special powers. And thanks to the web series, we started seeing the main 7 sporting some new outfits, which all look pretty good. Except Pinkie Pie. Yeah, I don't know, the whole tutu getup just never really clicked with me. Anyway, for this comic, there are 4 stories. The first story, Detention is Magic, has the main 7 in detention after causing havoc for Mrs. Harshwinny. The girls blame each other one by one, telling their side of the story, but thanks to Rarity having recorded the events on her phone, it turns out while everyone had a hand in the event, the whole situation was just one crazy, unintentional domino effect. So yeah, decent story. The next story, Dashin' Around, Rainbow Dash hears the news that her favorite author, A.K. Yearling, will be signing autographs for her newest edition of the Daring Do book series. But Applejack reminds Rainbow that she has to help them out with chores at Sweet Apple Acres, the same day that the book signing is happening. She tries speeding through the chores, but misses the book signing, to which AJ reveals that she invited Rainbow over just so that they could spend some quiet time together. But by sheer luck, she manages to get A.K. Yearling's autograph, and then declares that she's gonna have a wonderful evening with her friend Applejack. So if you're into seeing more Applejack and Rainbow Dash together, then this story will cover ya. The next story, Getting Seconds, the girls take part in a series of sporting events. Rainbow Dash is discouraged that she ends up getting second place most of the time, but thanks to her friends, she's reminded that it's not about winning, it's about having fun with her friends. I do think it's one of the more weaker stories, but it's still fine. As for the last story, well, it's just a reprint of Sunset's origin, so there's not much to say there. Despite the geodes being established, I'm surprised this comic features stories that still stick to that slice of life feel like the previous one-shot specials. Plus, this is the first time we get a different artist for these one-shot specials. Tony Cusisto, or whatever you pronounce that name. An artist who has helped out on the main comics from time to time. So now he's doing the artwork for this Equestria Girls comic and even got to write one of the stories. As you can see, the style tries to give the characters more realistic human anatomy, while the faces of the characters have more of an anime look to them. I still think it's nice. And that covers all the comics related to the Equestria Girls. And overall, I think they're alright. It doesn't do much to expand on this alternate universe, but if you weren't satisfied with that one holiday special being their last installment, then maybe you'll find some enjoyment with these comics. They were first released as separate issues, but some of the stuff would be combined into graphic novels. The stuff related to Fiendship Magic and Legends of Magic would get their own volumes. There's one volume that combines the 2013 annual and the 2014 holiday annual into one volume, which means that the Maniac story and the March Radness one-shot never really got that graphic novel reprint treatment. The prices for this stuff have varied, while March Radness ended up being the most rare comic of the series, and I think it's because of the fact that it was released in March of 2020. Yeah, by that time the COVID-19 pandemic really started to take effect, and many stores had to be shut down for a while, so I can only imagine that there was only a handful of copies that were available from whatever comic shop that was still open during that time. I got pretty lucky in finding a copy at TrotCon 2023, thanks to a vendor that was selling some used MLP comics. I think it was around like $7 or $8, but still, I was very happy to finally find one for a decent price. I'm sure you can still find this comic from official digital stores for reasonable prices, but if you're in the market for a physical copy of March Radness, well, good luck in finding one. Seriously, you're not gonna find it on eBay or Amazon. So why is it that we never got a full ongoing Equestria Girls comic series? I'm sure it has something to do with Hasbro and all that jazz, but I feel like it's just because the main series is more fascinating. Talking animals, a fleshed out world with fleshed out characters, magic, mythical creatures, and surprisingly a lot of history. Something like that is more interesting than some run-of-the-mill human world that mostly takes place in a high school setting. Even so, I know Equestria Girls has its fans, and I'm totally fine with this series. I still like Sunset Shimmer and the big and small adventures they go on, and of course I'll always like Human Fluttershy. I wouldn't mind if IDW decided to revisit the Equestria Girls stuff to give us some new stories again. If it's gonna be another one-shot special that just reprints random stories, then maybe this time this new volume will have all of the Equestria Girls stories in one volume. Well, that takes care of this episode of Forgotten Media, so this is Melting Man 234 signing out.